Have you ever truly paused to observe the psychological domino effect that occurs when human beings succumb to mass panic? It begins subtly, perhaps with a single alarming news headline or an overheard conversation filled with anxiety, then rapidly escalates into a self-perpetuating cycle of fear and irrational behavior that spreads through communities like an invisible contagion, bypassing rational thought and triggering primal survival instincts that our modern minds haven't evolved beyond. Despite our technological advancements and supposed sophistication as a species, this phenomenon raises profound questions about human nature that deserve careful examination. Why do otherwise intelligent individuals abandon reason when gripped by collective fear? What neurological and social mechanisms underlie this troubling tendency? And most crucially, how can we consciously override these deep-seated evolutionary impulses to maintain clarity of thought when those around us are losing theirs? Deconstructing the psychological architecture of panic. Panic represents far more than simple fear or concern. It constitutes a complete neurological hijacking of our higher cognitive functions, a temporary suspension of the prefrontal cortex's executive functions that leaves us operating purely from our ancient limbic system, which evolved to handle immediate physical threats like predator attacks, but proves woefully inadequate for navigating complex modern crises where thoughtful analysis rather than fight-or-flight responses would serve us better. Contemporary neuropsychological research reveals that during panic episodes, our brain's amygdala, the almond-shaped neural cluster responsible for threat detection, becomes hyperactivated, flooding our system with stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, while simultaneously suppressing activity in the rational decision-making centers, creating a perfect storm of emotional reactivity that explains why people in panic states often behave in ways that appear incomprehensible once the crisis has passed and normal cognitive function resumes. Marcus Aurelius, a case study in Stoic composure. To fully appreciate the Stoic approach to panic, we must immerse ourselves in the historical context of Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king who governed the vast Roman Empire during one of its most turbulent periods, facing simultaneous military threats along the frontiers, devastating plague outbreaks that decimated the population, and constant political intrigues that would have overwhelmed a lesser mind, yet whose personal meditations reveal an astonishingly serene and disciplined intellect that viewed each challenge not as a catastrophe, but as an opportunity to practice virtue and maintain equilibrium regardless of external circumstances. His private writings, never intended for publication but preserved through the centuries as the meditations, provide us with an intimate window into the thought processes of a leader who consciously cultivated what modern psychologists might call emotional regulation and cognitive reframing skills, demonstrating through concrete examples how to transform potential panic triggers into opportunities for self-mastery, as evidenced by passages where he reminds himself that external events only gain power over us through our judgments about them, and that by changing our perceptions, we fundamentally alter our experience of reality. A comprehensive framework for Stoic crisis management. 1. Cognitive distancing through temporal perspective. This practice involves consciously expanding our mental time frame beyond the immediate crisis, asking ourselves probing questions like, how will I view this situation in 6 months? What historical precedents exist for this challenge? How have previous generations survived similar or worse circumstances? By engaging in this temporal zooming out exercise, we activate what psychologists call the observer perspective, creating psychological space between ourselves and the triggering event, which reduces emotional intensity and allows for more measured responses. 2. Systematic desensitization via negative visualization. The Stoic technique of premeditatio malorum, premeditation of evils, functions similarly to modern exposure therapy, where we deliberately but safely expose ourselves to feared scenarios in our imagination. This isn't about pessimistic rumination, but about developing what Navy SEALs call stress inoculation, mentally rehearsing potential challenges so that if they occur, we've already built neural pathways for composed responses rather than panic reactions. 3. Strategic focus through the control dichotomy. This involves creating a detailed written inventory distinguishing between elements within our direct control, our judgments, values, and actions, and those outside it, others' opinions, global events, natural phenomena. The profound psychological benefit comes from redirecting all our mental energy exclusively toward the first category, while cultivating what psychologist Viktor Frankl called the space between stimulus and response, where our freedom lies. Historical consciousness as an antidote to hysteria. Marcus Aurelius's frequent reminders about the repetitive nature of human crises weren't mere philosophical musings, but practical psychological tools based on the observable patterns of history, an insight supported by modern research into what historians call the cyclical theory of social development, which demonstrates that while technological contexts change, fundamental human challenges remain remarkably consistent across centuries and civilizations. Consider the illuminating parallels between the Antonine Plague of 165 to 180 AD, which Marcus himself endured, and modern pandemics, where similar patterns of fear, misinformation, and social disruption emerged despite 2 millennia of medical advancement. Ancient financial panics like the Roman currency crisis under Nero and contemporary market crashes, both driven by the same underlying human emotions of greed and fear. Political upheavals across different eras that all follow predictable cycles of overreach, reaction, and rebalancing. This historical awareness serves as a powerful cognitive anchor, reminding us that what feels uniquely terrifying in the moment is simply the latest manifestation of enduring human experiences. The neurobiology of media-induced panic. Our contemporary information environment has created unprecedented conditions for panic generation, with neuroscientific studies demonstrating that negative news triggers stronger amygdala activation than positive news by a factor of 3, explaining why fear-based content dominates media. The dopamine-driven algorithms of social media platforms actively reinforce panic responses because heightened emotional states increase engagement metrics. Continuous exposure to crisis reporting creates what psychologists term availability heuristic overload, making us overestimate threats based on their mental availability rather than statistical probability. Practical neuropsychological interventions. 1. Physiological self-regulation through breath work. The 4-7-8 breathing technique, inhale for 4 counts, hold for 7, exhale for 8, directly stimulates the vagus nerve, activating the parasympathetic nervous system to counteract panic's physiological symptoms. This works because breathing patterns directly influence heart rate variability, HRV, a key biomarker of stress resilience. 2. Cognitive restructuring through journaling. The practice of fear scripting, writing out worst-case scenarios followed by rational responses, engages the prefrontal cortex's problem-solving functions. Research shows this converts abstract anxieties into concrete challenges that appear more manageable. 3. Somatic grounding techniques. Methods like progressive muscle relaxation or cold water exposure work by interrupting the panic feedback loop through strong physical sensations. These leverage what's known as the orienting response, redirecting neural resources away from catastrophic thinking. The Stoic approach to collective hysteria. Marcus Aurelius' admonition to let them scream whatever they want encapsulates a profound psychological strategy for maintaining equanimity amid social chaos, recognizing that 1. Mass panic follows predictable social contagion patterns similar to crowd behavior theories. 2. Attempting to reason with someone in full physiological panic is neurologically futile until their arousal state decreases. 3. Our primary responsibility lies in modeling calm behavior, as emotions are subconsciously mirrored through limbic resonance. Building your personal resilience system. Creating a comprehensive anti-panic framework requires 1. Preventive practices. Daily Stoic exercises like morning preparation and evening reflection. Regular study of historical crises and human responses. 2. Immediate interventions. Pre-written emergency protocols for various scenarios. Curated playlists of grounding music or audio. 3. Community safeguards. Identifying and cultivating relationships with fellow rational thinkers, establishing mutual accountability for maintaining perspective. Remember, in an age of algorithmic outrage, choosing reason becomes a revolutionary act. Stay thoughtful, stay grounded, and as always, extend compassion. especially to those temporarily blinded by fear.